Hi everybody, welcome back to another Free Tutorial Friday. We are now the end of August, and I have been spending some time after my vacation kind of trying to stay on vacation, actually. And I've been doing, I have another use for this actually, so it's not entirely vacation, but this little hot rod that I've been modeling in Moto has been really fun for me to get back into Moto. It's been a while since all my focus this year was on getting the drawing book done. So it was all 2D work. So it's really fun to get back in and try to remember how to model things. So I had a request from Andre Costa this week on my Facebook page to show how I did the weathering. Let me see if I can quickly find the image. Let's see. I took this hot rod and I put it into an environment. I don't know where it is. Sorry. I get all prepared and then I go and talk about something I did not have queued up. It's my own fault. Let's see, I think I have it somewhere here. Bingo. So here's the image that I posted on my Facebook page and was asked to show how I did the salt technique. It's actually a really simple technique, so let's jump right into it. I find it to be one of the most fun things to do is weathering and giving a little history and usage to the objects that I design. So here's the hot rod in its clean state, and we're going to salt it up because it's been out driving around. We're also going to replace the background. So here's the render that I did. This is typically the way that I work in Moto. The only UVs on this entire car are only the tire tread, and then that allowed me to quickly do some salt on there with the second image just set on screen to just get the white part for the salt on there. And so you see that if you remember from last week, I was spending all the time on the headlights. Well, now it's out on the salt flats. It's going to go and try to run fast. So I added a rear spoiler and I got rid of the headlights. So it's been stripped out. You don't need headlights if you're out driving around on the salt flats during the middle of the day. So this is kind of its clean version. Added a little partial engine cover. So these guys have attempted to make their car fast for the day. And so here it is, a salt render. And this is just actually in Moto, I think this is the leather texture, but I changed the colors to white and gray, so it's a little bit speckly. And you'll see when you turn up a lot of bump, you get this weird core shadow through here. I'm not going to ignore that because I'm just going to paint that out or erase it anyway, and that's why I already have the tire working in my favor. So, but that's what you get, sort of this crunchy bump mapped. And you can do this on dirt, whatever the color is of the ground that you want to splash onto your car. Just render your entire scene with that dirt layer, or in this case salt layer, over the top. And then all you need to do is throw it on top of the other one. And now we can close this guy and make sure it snaps, right? So to position it, the easiest way to do that, you can copy and place in that way, but you can also just drag it and snap. So, whoops, see, there we go. I have a view turned to snap, and it's snapping to my layer guides and the layer size, and because you want those to be exactly on top of each other, and that'll allow us just to add a layer mask to this and erase it. The other thing I want to do is replace the background. So I have a background here that was the background I used for this HDR, but you see, because it was the HDR and I didn't do any special, it wasn't really shot as a spherical HDR, it was just this image, and I just distorted it in Moto so I get all the same color and values reflecting into the surface. It's all distorted and getting grainy because that's straight out of my render, so you want to replace it with a higher res plate for the background. So I'm going to do that. So let's pull this guy over, and it's going to go down to the bottom eventually. Okay, now what I really need to do in order to get this background plate, don't need this anymore, to get this background plate to go behind this, I need to pull that car off the background. So what I have for that over here on channels, I have this alpha mask, and that alpha mask is automatically output when you do a render in Moto. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the salt and this car off the background, and then I can layer them on top of this new plate. So let's go here, just load it by hitting the Command key, go back to my layers, and for now let's just do Command J. So it's a new layer via copy. So I just pulled that selection off of there. So let's load it again. Okay, and let's go back down to this layer, Command J. I'm going to pull that one off, and now I can put this underneath. Okay, so let's see, should have now just my two layers with the new background plate, and my background plate is much higher res than the render, so I'm going to have to move it around. It's nice because then we can move it and position right without having to distort it. Now to get this to work, all you need to do, the most important thing, I'm gonna scale it down a little bit. What you need to do is make sure that your horizon line lines up with the horizon in your rendering. If you want your ground plane, you want your vehicle or any object to be sitting on the same ground plane. That's the most important. So let's position this, maybe something like that. And I'm going to turn down the opacity a little bit so that I can position the horizon line. So right now it would be something like that. Okay, so they're in the same position, and that'll make sure that my vehicle looks like it's sitting on the same ground plane. And so I have a little bit more resolution here. The sky's a bit cleaner. Now, compositionally, I don't really like it because it's cropping those mountaintops. So maybe let's go to our canvas size, and let's add some height, like that. Okay. And let's see, the bottom of it's not great. The only thing I can do there to make the bottom work is either have to distort it, or I could paint in some more of the ground, or I could crop the image. The other option is to take that background plate and scale it until the bottom hits. Okay, and then I have to scale it back up until the horizon lines back up. So right about there. That's my other option. And I'm going to do that one. And there we go. All right, so my horizon lines up and I'm all set. Now the only thing that's left is to add the salt. Okay, and I really like to do it this way because as opposed to painting the salt on it, it's sometimes easier to go backwards and just erase out areas where you don't want the weathering and the salt in this case. So what I'm going to do is just apply a layer mask. So this is a little different. I mean, the layer masking part is the same as the previous sort of hot rod weathering I did in the Photoshop rendering. In this case, we're using Moto, and I'm going to start here. Now, what's fun about this, let's say that you were just imagining that, right, you've been driving around in the salt all day, and so you're going to get a lot more around the wheels, right, where it kicks up the salt onto the side of the car, especially as this front wheel turns, it's going to kick salt up through here. Also, this is going to kick up, and then a lot of it's going to kick into the back here, the wheels, and then a less on the top. And then as you are cruising around and you do multiple speed runs and things, you might go in and start to wipe off your windows. So I'm going to find a good textured brush here to use. That's a bit spotty. We'll use that one later. How about... Okay, you just experiment, right? And if you mess it up, it's no big deal. All you have to do is flip that back to white and bring it all back. Okay, because it's a layer mask, so you don't have to worry about damaging it. So you might go in there and start, you wiped off the windows, for instance, so you could see. And what you want to do if you're spending a lot of time doing this right, and not that this technique isn't right, but the speed I'm doing it with will not very precise. So you can start by saying, okay, well, he's going to take a rag, right, and kind of wipe out the windows, but he's not going to get it all the way into, right, the driver's not going to get this all the way into the little nooks and crannies. So that's kind of what you leave out. And you say, oh, we got to open up the door multiple times. So put like some handprints around here, right? And then getting in and out, rubbed off the salt with a pant leg, that sort of thing. So maybe this edge gets a little less salty, right? You can always bring it back a bit. And then the bigger ones, there's not going to be much salt across the top of the car. So I'm going to let a lot of that show. Maybe some kicking up here. It doesn't need to see anything in the back, right? So maybe I'll leave a lot of salt kicking up there. Sorry, I didn't really organize my brushes for this demo. So a little bit less through there, but still salty. Okay, I like to go a little bit less. I'm just using a big soft airbrush now. But that makes the dust like it looks very, very fine. If you want to keep it looking a little bit more like big, chunky, salt, use a more textured brush. And then you'll see now that it gets a bit more texture, like there's some salt spots. Okay, I already know I have nice salt on the tops of the tires, so now here's where I'm getting rid of that bad, right, awful looking core shadow through there, and this one too. I'll use my tire and the salt I already had. Okay, and then I'll just do really quick, big pass, first pass. And you can see you just have to go back in and start to change the size of your brush, how much care you're putting into doing it. In this case, not much. Okay, so that kind of thing. So you see just even big quick passes, it already looks interesting. It's a nice mix. Okay, so now what I want to do is start to fine tune it a little bit. And let's grab this guy. And I'm going to reverse it. And now you can start to say, well, instead of like wiping off a window to make it clean, right, or rubbing a door, getting in and out, you say, well, what about this kicking up, right? What about this wheel kicking up some salt and just getting some spots onto the side here? So you can do like that, and then you can go back. So you just finesse those things and just back and forth, using different kinds of brushes. Okay, it's not going to be much on the front here or the top. So that's, pretty quick and dirty. These sort of passes can be really, really fast. Change the grain of the salt, just make your brush smaller. Right, so use a finer grain stamped brush. So you can see you can finesse this. So this map, you can take as much time on it as you want. And by mixing your Photoshop brushes, you can get a nice variety. Sort of maybe some salt kicked up into here on the bottom edge there. So you can always go all the way back to the beginning and then just start over. So, pretty fun. I like to just think about the reality of it and where would, the salt kick up, where would it gather, where would it get rubbed off, right, by the driver or the wind, for instance. So if you're going very, very fast, you're going to take off certain parts of it, so maybe not going to stick much on this surface, but maybe go back into those little sort of nooks and crannies. Maybe not so much on the rim. Right, and then I like to come in with a very small brush and put in a couple of really nice, strong, splotches of salt. So you could almost use, let's see, something like this. If it was really small, if you just come in and you could just kick in a couple of little guys that stuck across the surface. It's not really the best. I think there's. Use Danny's old brush here. There we go. So speckle in a couple of big grains of salt that have stuck on. So mix it up, get a variety, right? So use a variety of brushes, that's the key. And then to just think about it as if it was real. that's, I think, the easiest way to approach it. Those little streaks don't work out so good, so I'm just taking those back a bit. So that's really all there is to it. The other rendering had one other thing going for it, and that was that I kind of weathered it a bit and did a little levels adjustment. So let's try that. Okay, so if we're happy with that, there it is clean. There it is with the mask. You can always change its opacity as well, and or double it if it's not enough, and just go back to your layer mask, modify, keep modifying and modifying. All right, the other thing I did is I kind of weathered it. So let's see, let's go here. Let's do Command All, Command Shift C, Command Shift V. Just made a copy of the whole thing on one layer. And now I'm going to bring in a new layer, which is this old paper, this yellowish kind of paper scan. Because one of the things that happens when you take a computer rendering and you mix it with a photograph, right, is that they don't tend to match perfectly. So you get a lot of like really clean surfaces on the 3D rendering side, and then you get a lot of grain and texture on the photography side. So to harmonize those and bring them all back together to get this to work better with that photograph, you can layer something on top to harmonize the colors and also to harmonize, right, the look. And you can also start to stylize. So you can start to, and this is kind of like doing an Instagram kind of thing to it. So using the compositing tools over here, start to mix it, right? Think about how you might want to overlay something. I think I'm going to use multiply, and we're going to change the opacity and the value. It's got a little too much yellow, so it's starting to look a little too much like sand. So I'm just take down that opacity, or sorry, the saturation a little bit. So a little bit less yellow. It's also a little bit too dark, so I'm just going to brighten it up so it has less effect because it's on a multiply layer. Okay, and now I'm going to apply a layer mask to it. And I kind of like the effect out around the edges, so I give it a bit of a vignette. So I'm going to apply a little layer mask and have less effect right through here. So pushing that focal point and the clarity of my vehicle a little. Maybe a little bit through there. And now maybe we try a softer airbrush with lower opacity. And let's minimize that through in general through the middle. So a little bit less texture, a little bit back. Okay, and then the last thing you can do is you could apply this, a little bit of grain to the whole thing, or even the photo filters are nice too. So if you go to special effects and go to a photo filter, okay, now we can play with some photo filters here, and now I'm sort of harmonizing all the colors from my rendering and the background plate. And so we can pick through some of these basic ones and just see if there's something that we like. It sort of stylizes the whole thing. So I just cycle through them. Maybe a sepia tone. Okay, and the last thing I like to do is again make another copy of the whole thing. So I never ruin the original, and I just keep copying flattened layers on top. And the last thing, let's go back like this, maybe a little levels adjustment. Since we're out on the salt flats in theory, I need to push probably that contrast a little bit. So if I really want to now keep the texture and the harmony of the colors, now maybe I want to experiment with pushing that more daytime look, and I'm playing with the exposure. The other thing you can do inside Photoshop, so that's the previous, there's the new one. Let's do another one. Okay, and you can play with this, oh, where is it? I can tell I haven't done it for a while. Let's see, there's like this faux HDR, well, it's actually real HDR modifier, but I know you guys are just shouting at me, hey, it's right there, it's right there. There is, oh, can't find it. Here it is, HDR toning. So I'm just going to flatten it. I'll just undo whatever we do, but this is pretty interesting to take your basic. Let me just, you know what? I'll just make okay, let's just make a copy of this. A really fun way, a fast way to make copies. History. Just take a snapshot, make a copy of your entire file. Okay, so I have a copy with all the same layers, right? And I'm going to take one of them and I'm going to flatten it. Okay, and now let's go here. Now let's go back to that now that I've found it. Adjustments, HDR toning. So HDR toning is pretty fun. It tries to treat it like an HDR image that has a high dynamic range to it. But you can still get some interesting results. And what's fun that I like is you have all of these controls to go in and tweak things. So let's say you can pull up the exposure, right? And you can do it all from one place as opposed to having to do levels and color and highlights. You can go in here and just play with all of it in one image. So it's a lot of fun to go in and tweak it, right? And just slide things around and just see what happens. Make it crunchier, right? Pushing up the detail. So it's a fun thing to do sort of in post with your images, even though they're Photoshop renderings and they weren't, right, a high dynamic range image at all. You can still get a lot of fun examples or fun effects this way. All right, I'm going to go with that. All right, so we've got that, and then there's where it came from. So this one versus that one. Now they both have a nice look, just a different look, right? This is getting sort of a crunchy photographic feel, and this one still feels, you know, like the exposure could shift. The old way I would do that is just with levels and just do overall level adjustment. But that other HDR toning thing gives you some pretty cool controls. All right, that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. It's a really simple, fun thing to do, but you take advantage of Photoshop, do a couple of compositing things. You take advantage of working out of a 3D program, having multiple renders done. So you just throw those on top of each other, add a couple layer masks, and then do a little bit of post with some adjustments and layer masks and, you know, photo filters and things, and you can make your rendering a little bit more textural, a little bit more interesting. So I hope you liked it. I'll give you a little preview of the other image I'm going to be doing this week. I'll put it onto my Facebook page. Here's how it's shaping up. I now have a truck, a car hauler, and the car's just come out of the ramp, and I'm doing this sort of sunrise rendering where this is going to be salty because he was out driving around, and this is clean coming out of the truck. So this is kind of one that I'm playing with. So I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great week, and check in next time. Bye-bye.